like shut up and do the work, or you're being sent home with all this debt.
Welcome to the Animal Law Podcast. I am so excited this month. It's very different. It's a little different. We're joined by Amal Bouhabib. She's a senior staff attorney at FarmSTAND. Amal has spent most of her career representing farm workers as an attorney and later director of Southern Migrant Legal Services. She's now at FarmSTAND, and there she's pursuing cases that highlight and seek justice for frontline food workers. I'm not sure exactly who that includes, but it's probably a lot of people. And those are the people that feed us. And she's exploring new ways to create a humane, fair, and accessible food system, which we all are in favor of. Amal has all these unbelievably fascinating things in her bio, including work as a journalist in Beirut, working for the Brennan Center. But the one I'm going to mention in particular is she earned her JD from Fordham University School of Law, because so did I.
Yay!
Go Fordham.
Yeah.
Welcome, Amal.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. I mentioned this before we started recording, but I'll say it again. We're not going to know much of anything about usually I interview people about the Animal Welfare Act or cruelty laws or whatever, and people have a little background. We know nothing, or at least I do. I know nothing. So we'll have to keep it relatively basic. And before we get into that, just let me give you all a quick reminder about the Our Hen House podcast. Rising Anxieties comes out on Tuesdays, the Hen Report on Thursdays, the long-form interview, including this one, on Fridays. Bonus comes out on Mondays, and we're a podcast and we're on YouTube. So subscribe, hit like wherever you listen. Okay, that's done. All right. So, as I mentioned, we don't do a lot of cases on farm workers. It's not really our beat, but it's certainly extremely tangential to our beat. And so and it's something that we really need to know more about. And I'd like to mention a few cases that are going on, but I thought we would really focus on this J-1 visa case. And when I first read about this case in the news, which was a while ago, I was truly shocked. And, not that much shocks us all anymore. And actually, since then, given the events that have happened, I'm not sure it's as shocking. It's still as horrible as it was then, but it's not quite as shocking because things have gotten really out of hand. Can you just start by giving us the story? I like to start, with just every lawsuit is a story. The basic story of what happened to these 3 young men from Guatemala, and then we'll get into details.
Yes. Yes, there's 3 young men from Guatemala who had just completed their studies in agronomy when they were offered what they thought was the opportunity of a lifetime, which was to get to come to the U.S. On a visa, legally, and get an internship, a 1-year-long internship at a farm, a U.S. farm. That's what they believed, in Nebraska, it turned out. And they would be getting, it was a paid internship. They'd be getting a stipend. They'd have housing. And the real lure was that the visa they were going to be on, which is called the J-1 visa, was a cultural exchange visa that actually came out of the Fulbright era that was intended to really teach foreign students how to run a business, from the American perspective. So really to get the nuts and bolts of how the work was done on the farm, but also the business side of it and the marketing side of it. And then the idea was that these foreign students would take that back to their countries and kind of implement the American model. So, a lot of lofty ambitions. But they signed up, they were told they had to pay some recruitment fees, travel fees, paperwork fees, etc. That amounted to upwards of $3,000 for each of them, which was a significant amount for Guatemalan students. And when they got to Nebraska, it was not as promised. It was a swine production farm called Livingston Enterprises. So
No,
relatively...
They knew it was a pig farm, right? I mean,
They did.
That wasn't a surprise. That's what they were.
No, that part was not a surprise.
Yeah.
I think there was perhaps an idea that it wasn't going to be as industrial as it was. Yeah. Because the websites, everything they could learn about it, the websites make it look like, this family farm that started with 1 pig, etc. So you're right. They did know that it was going to be pigs. But they were told, they had a very specific training program that gets approved by the State Department. It's written out everybody signs it. The employer signs it. Their recruiter, who acts as a broker between them and the employer, signs it under oath. And one of the things they attest to is that these students will not be used as general labor workers. They're there for this internship. But when they got there, that's exactly what happened. They were treated as general labor. The training was not training. They didn't have any training, in fact, or they were told to follow people and learn things, which resulted in a lot of harm to them, but harm to the animals, as we'll talk about, foreseeable harm to both of them. And when they inquired about the training program and safety, they were retaliated against and eventually fired, which left them in a big bind because they had gone into debt to come here. So, as a farm worker, lawyer, that type of bait and switch is not necessarily new to me, but I'm excited to talk about it for people for whom it is new.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably everybody listening knows it's bad, but we don't have all that many details about exactly in what ways it's bad. So that's what we want. And let's get a few more details out of the way. Let's talk about who the players are, because the way this visa program works, I read the complaint, but there's only so much you can glean from reading the complaint. There's this Worldwide Farmers Exchange, which is one of the entities, and then LEI Enterprises is actually the pig farm. So, how do they relate to each other and to the J-1 program?
Right. So actually, this is baked into the J-1 program as a way, I think, to facilitate recruitment of foreign students. That there is what they call a sponsor, which is basically like a recruitment agency, and that's Worldwide Farmers Exchange. So they're U.S. based. In this case, they happen to have a Guatemalan recruiter who finds the students, recruits them, relays all the promises of the program, gets them to sign the papers, explains everything that's going to happen. Meanwhile, the U.S. part of Worldwide Farmers is actually helping draft and get the paperwork for the State Department ready. So in this case, I'm sure they helped draft a phased training program that I was talking about before, that the host, that's the LEI Enterprises in this case, will sign and attest to. And those two are working together to create the training program, but then Worldwide Farmers would kind of submit that to the State Department for approval. So they're really this kind of broker in the middle of the foreign students and the host. And earlier I called them employer. They're not technically an employer because they're not supposed to be employing these interns. So they are the host, and they will be the ones training. Yeah, the de facto employer. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, and this woman in Guatemala who works with Worldwide, she's one of the defendants as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another woman who's a defendant, just to sort everybody out.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the Guatemalan defendant was the Guatemalan recruiter. So she was in Guatemala. Her last name is Cifuentes. And then Ashley, she is the president of Worldwide Farmers. So she's in charge of the recruitment agency.
How big is this program? And is it just animal agriculture? Is it the whole gamut? Like, is this a big deal? It's so interesting that it's run by the State Department and not the Ag Department.
Absolutely. Although that might be changing under Trump. But yes, it is really interesting. And I think it's run by the State Department because it was an exchange program. So the J-1 program itself is pretty vast because it also includes au pairs, things like that, and camp counselors. Yeah. So and those are different types of J-1, but yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. And then within that, these plaintiffs were on the internship/trainee J-1 visa, which is pretty specific. And in that category, I think animal ag takes up a big chunk of it. And then I know they also have like vineyards and things like that. So there is an ag aspect to it. I don't think they're being brought, though, to do like vegetables. I think because we already have a system to fill those needs.
Right. Yeah. And maybe we can get a little to some of the other programs as well to get immigrants in legally, but not permanently.
Right.
Which seems to be always the goal. Can you go a little bit more into what the offer was? like what the offer was regarding pay, regarding conditions, and maybe worldwide standards, that this offer was supposed to fit into, so that the kind of things that they heard about that reassured them that this was going to be a good deal.
Yeah. So Worldwide Farmers promised them through this Guatemalan agent, number one, that it would be a Monday through Friday job at 45 hours a week, which sounds pretty reasonable. And not a job, I said job, but I mean a training program. So Monday through Friday, 45 hours. If they wanted to work more than that, they'd have the opportunity. They would get what they thought was, it's called a stipend in the program because this is not supposed to be a job, but they thought a $2,500 stipend per month with the opportunity to get a little more if they wanted to spend a little more time. They would have weekends off. They would have housing provided to them. They thought their commutes to and from the farm would be provided to them. They expected to be able to partake in American cultural opportunities, which is also part of the program. That is a J-1 visa requirement. And that probably could mean anything, but the idea is to kind of get exposed to American culture.
Like the parts of the country that contain huge pig farms, probably don't have that many things that
Right.
probably doesn't have a lot of Broadway shows
No,
or whatever we think of as American culture. I don't know.
That's true. I wonder what
I'm
the
sure
original thought was.
I'm sure Nebraska has good theater. I'm not saying it doesn't, but the part of Nebraska where the pig farms are.
Yeah.
All right. And you mentioned they had to spend a lot of money to take part of the program. You already told us that. And they ended up borrowing a lot of that money because these are not well-off people. And
Right.
there was like a literal bait and switch right before they left, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I didn't even talk about that. Right. So they were expecting housing to be free, as I said. The night before they flew out to Nebraska, the Worldwide Farmers agent had them sign a document that said they would be charged for housing and a commute. And basically, they were told if they didn't sign it, they couldn't fly out. So not a lot of choice there. They'd already spent the money. Yeah. And suddenly they were signing off on, hundreds of dollars a month for housing.
Yeah, which given their stipend was not enormous, but they did end up earning even less than their stipend, right?
Right. Correct.
All right. So as to the work itself, what kind of training did they receive? I know this was kind of a long, detailed story, but give us the picture. Yeah. And the kind of work they did and the kind of training they received.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll tell you, this was a learning process for me too, because coming from a field farm worker background, I didn't know a lot about what happens in the animal production world, and it opened my eyes a lot. So it's bad. Okay, so one of their first jobs was what they call processing newborn piglets. What was I going to say? Trigger warning, I guess. But yeah, they apply a tattoo gun to the piglets' ears to give them identifying marks, and they cut off their tails with scissors, which I'm told is so that they don't bite each other's tails, I think is the idea.
Right. Tail docking, it's called.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously those are dangerous, kind of serious processes, I think, especially cutting off the tails. But they were not trained in that. They were supposed to be trained in how to do this. So when one of the plaintiffs was tattooing, one of the piglets began bleeding profusely. They didn't get any instruction from anyone about whether he was doing it correctly. And sometimes the pigs did bleed out and die. And even then, they didn't retrain or help the plaintiffs learn how to do this correctly. I mean, they were most of the time being told to just follow whoever was already doing it, which often was another J-1 worker.
Okay.
J-1 intern.
So this facility didn't just have a few workers from Guatemala. They had
J-1
that's
was
an important source of their workforce.
Yes, you're right. We should say that. And they came from all over the world. There were some from Africa, some from Eastern Europe, some from South America. I don't know if it was in the hundreds, but I think it might have been close. It was a large program. Oh. And then on top of that, they had other Mexican immigrant workers who were on a different visa.
Okay. I would love to go into that But there's a limit to how many programs we can
It's true. Yes.
tear apart.
There was also one of them was helping with the sow's birthing, which you might know already, involved administering oxytocin to induce labor. And they also had to extract the piglets from the sows. No, not given any instruction on how to do that, besides looking at another intern. And one of our plaintiffs accidentally administered 2 doses of oxytocin instead of 1, and resulting in the sow suffering a prolapsed uterus and dying. So these are just some of the most extreme examples, I think. But this is, they're doing this every day, not knowing what they're doing. It's bound to lead to some terrible results.
I know we had mentioned that we wanted to talk about some of the ways in which the mistreatment of the workers intersects with the mistreatment of the animals, and certainly
Right.
the complete lack of training in these
Right.
processes is one. But the actual in reading the complaint, it was clear that the task that they were assigned that was the most horrifying, and it does not sound like a big deal at all when you talk about it, not vis-a-vis the animals, but vis-a-vis, was called power washing.
Yes.
Now, I've power washed the side of a wall. It was fine, but until you read it, you just it's unbelievable. And when you think about it, I mean, what they're doing is using power washers to clean all of this shit out of these barns after months. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about how hard it is? They're the whole power washing story.
Yeah, I'm glad that came across because it was new to me too. I thought the same thing. Power washing, okay, it's hard. But yeah, you're right. So they were tasked with spraying a barn that had been emptied of the pigs with a high pressure hose. But what they're cleaning is shit, like literal shit, so feces, blood, other waste left behind after weeks of confinement. Right, they're in there. So the water's very hot, dangerously hot. It can cause serious wounds. The pressure by itself can cause serious wounds. And while they're spraying this very intense, high pressure water, all of that filth is blowing up and all around them, in the air, in their faces, and their ears, everywhere.
Obviously,
so
yeah.
it did, yeah. So not only was it putting immense strain on their bodies because they're doing this sometimes 3 or 4 hours a day, but it's making them physically sick. I mean, they were breaking out in hives. Their noses were bleeding. It was making them physically sick.
There was sickness. There were actual injuries as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, there were injuries from a few of the different tasks.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, and I think maybe all 3 of them actually experienced injuries by being kicked or charged by one of the sows because they were, they had to try to move them from place to place without, again, any training.
These are very, very traumatized animals. And I don't know whether you've ever been around pigs raised for food. Like, I'm sure everybody listening has been to sanctuaries, but they are enormous. I mean, they are enormous animals.
That's what I heard. Yeah, maybe 300 pounds, right?
Yeah.
This is what we were told. Yeah.
Well, especially the mothers, because they're full grown. I mean, the ones that are sent to slaughter are only sent to slaughter at 4 to 6 months, so they're not as big. But the mothers are huge.
Yeah. So there were several injuries, and one of them did have a power hose kind of snap up against him and burn him. I think that's right. I think it's burning. But yeah, he didn't feel like he could report it due to the atmosphere of the work.
So we've kind of covered it, and people are getting the idea that this is really, really bad conditions. The pay was inadequate. Can you just talk before we finish this discussion? Talk a little bit about the housing because it was so bad, and also what happened when they complained or talked about leaving.
So the housing, yeah, I think and all of us, when we talk about thinking we're going to be provided housing in another country in an internship program, probably envision something relatively nice, a dorm, something like that.
Yeah.
They were put in this refurbished Walmart, which had been, reconstructed to have small rooms. So they were put in a room with maybe three other people, so four-door room, no windows, barely space for their belongings. Uh, they had to share bathrooms that were never cleaned, and they had a common area, but that's really all the privacy. I mean, the privacy they had was in their room with four people, so no real privacy. Um, they complained about it being pretty filthy just because of how many people were put into this one spot. There was really only one outdoor access, which was fenced in. I mean, obviously, you could leave the compound, if you had transportation, which none of them do because they're all coming from foreign countries. But yeah, the one outdoor space linked to the housing was a small concrete area with fencing or wire around it. Um, so that was uh, that was adding to their feeling of kind of oppression and isolation, um, especially because they were paying hundreds of dollars for that housing, and all of them were. So probably making Livingston's probably making a profit off of that.
Clearly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the housing, and what was your other question?
What the threats
Oh, right,
regarding what would
okay.
happen if they left?
Yeah, so two of the plaintiffs especially, I would say, I mean, complaining sounds like a bad thing, but, brought up the discrepancies between the training program they were promised and what they were doing, and the kind of unsafety and the dangerousness of what they were doing. Um, so often they were separated from each other because they didn't want them to be together, kind of talking about things. But yeah, then there were supervisors who, you know, made threats or comments suggesting they could go back to Guatemala if they didn't like it, or they should go back to Guatemala if they don't like it, and basically shutting them down. I mean, operating as threats to make them feel like they had to stay and do this stuff, like shut up and do the work, or you're being sent home with all this debt.
And one of them actually left, right?
That's right. Yeah, there were the third one, who didn't complain just because he was so scared. Actually, left kind of in the middle of the night. Couldn't take it anymore.
All right. So I think that unless I've left anything out, I think that kind of outlines the horrific conditions that these young men were in.
Right.
I'm just the thing that they always say. This is a very general question, and I'll get back to details. But they always say, "Well, the reason we need immigrants in these special programs is because Americans won't do this work." Um, I always say, "Well, you pay anybody enough money." They'll do the work. What if it's $1 million a day? You'd have
Yeah.
plenty of people to do the work. It's all,
Yeah.
that's basically a financial argument. This is a financial necessity for the industry, isn't it?
Oh,
And that's
yeah.
really what we're talking about, is making meat cheaper.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's, I think, it's not just in the production side, but the slaughterhouses work the same way. I mean, it is part of the system to pay the least amount that you can for labor in the easiest conditions, the conditions that cost the least, right? um, in order to make the meat cheaper and the profits higher, right? So that's the system. And who are the best, I guess, marks for that? It's not Americans who know their rights or who could make more money driving an Uber, right? It's foreigners who come here feeling like they don't have another choice, like they can't leave, um, that they'll be retaliated against in some kind of immigration way if they complain. And I mean, and often people who don't know their rights at all. Like that was part of my job as a farm worker lawyer, is even telling people what their rights are. So they really are kind of a perfect exploitative group, is the immigrants who are coming here on the temporary visas.
It's true of every industry that you pay people the least amount you can, but agriculture is exceptional, and they get all these special rules because they're feeding the world, as they like to say. How did it happen that they managed to get representation? I mean, you mentioned this is a big program, and there's people from all over the world. Why are these three young men in court?
think by virtue of their tenacity, these two, there was two of them especially who really, the ones who were complaining a lot and kind of pointing out the discrepancies and trying to assert their rights.
I think we should use their names, but even though they each have like several names, but just so I'm not ignoring who they are.
So Freddie Alvarado Contreras is the first one, Sergio Escobar Gonzalez, and Dennis Najera Barrillas. Dennis is the one who left early. And
Okay.
Sergio and Freddie are the ones who kept trying to enforce their rights. They were eventually fired because they wouldn't stop talking. And they reached out, I think, first to their consulate, the Guatemalan consulate. And then, they did try to reach out to the State Department several times because part of the program suggests that you do that if you're being abused or if, something's going wrong with the program. They weren't getting responses. I think ultimately they were put in touch with the Nebraska Farm Workers unit of the legal services. And the legal services got in touch with FarmSTAND, and that's how we
Okay.
came to this. But yeah, they were
Well, good
just
for them.
reaching out to everybody they could reach out to. Yeah.
Yeah. It is an embarrassment. I mean, one gets tired of the embarrassments of being an American these days, but that the State Department was involved in this, it's just, I mean, apparently in a big way.
Yeah.
It's just humiliating. Okay. So they found you. You decided to bring, so you went to court. What court are you in?
The District of Nebraska.
Okay.
The U.S. District Court, District of
Federal
Nebraska.
court.
Yeah, federal court.
And we're going to go through causes of action here, as we always do. But, as I mentioned, these are different from the causes of action we usually discuss, and we're not that familiar with them. And maybe before we go into the details of them, can you explain your feelings about why animal lawyers should know about this type of case? Like, what are the... I mean, I think it's really important that there be intersections, even though there are obviously some strange bedfellow aspects that animal lawyers would frequently, not all of them, but frequently would like to see the whole industry go away, and farm workers would like to see the conditions improve. They're not totally aligned, but they're aligned in so many different ways. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, so for me, when it coming to FarmSTAND, I had not worked in animal ag very much, except for slaughterhouse, workers who'd been in slaughterhouses. And so for me, I also wanted to explore that tension, this idea that, if you're helping the workers, aren't you keeping the system, right? Aren't you upholding the system? But I actually think it's the opposite. So obviously there's alignment between both of them are being mistreated, but really it's talking about a system that runs on exploitation of the animals, of the workers, of the environment. And I think what FarmSTAND tries to do, and what we're trying to do well, is get at all those angles, like this, to get at the system itself. And so part of uplifting workers is that it should uplift, it should change everything, right? If you have to pay workers more, if you have to treat them better, you're going to have to slow down and treat the animals better. So, I mean, putting aside that maybe it's not going to immediately get rid of industrial animal ag. I mean, hopefully it gets rid of industrial animal ag. Maybe it's not going to get rid of the entire animal ag world. Yeah, uplifting workers should be a way of also uplifting the treatment of the animals. I think another aspect of it, which, is just, I don't know, extra, is that we don't often get a glimpse into these industries, partially because they have so many laws shielding them from us getting inside, right? And I think the workers' stories are a really great way of exposing that. And often those workers are the whistleblowers for animal abuses, and they get fired for them, so there is kind of a correlation between how the workers are being kind of made to hide the abuses of the animals, etc. So I do think those things can go hand in hand.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's certainly not perfectly aligned. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are workers who are problems and people in the animal world hate them. But no, political alignments are never perfect. I mean, that's where the whole expression strange bedfellows came from. So there is so much alignment here. And especially in what we were just talking about a little bit before, that all of this is about money. And And raising the price of doing what you're doing to animals is all good as far as we're concerned, especially now that people are much more familiar with the idea that we don't actually have to eat this stuff. All right. All right, I'll get off my soapbox and let's talk about causes of action. There are a lot of causes of action here, and most of our listeners are not going to be familiar with many of the laws involved. A lot of them are statutory. But this is, I think, a good opportunity to familiarize people with what the industry is supposed to be doing, at least as to these J-1 workers. And so I thought maybe you could give us an overview of the different causes of action available. But then for the deeper dive, we'll focus on the first two, which are trafficking and RICO. Does that work?
I'm always surprised that I mean, obviously people are not familiar with workers' rights most of the time, but I often get the question, why didn't you just bring labor law violations? And my answer is because we don't have a lot of labor laws. You may be surprised to know. So a lot of the causes of action we have to use are statutory, as you said, and kind of creative. In this case, actually, I think the violations were pretty straightforward. So we did bring a RICO claim, which maybe your listeners would be familiar as kind of the mafia, or maybe from like the criminal law shows, racketeering. And what do we say? The TVPRA, which is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. That is a federal statute that was unanimously, I mean, I think it was very strongly approved by Congress a few decades ago. And that I have used a lot in these types of cases, especially for migrant workers, because one of the parts of the trafficking statute, maybe when people hear trafficking, they think of sex trafficking, but labor trafficking is actually a much more common form of trafficking. So part of that is something that we call forced labor, which would probably look a little bit like what it sounds like, being forced to work, being compelled to work against your will. In the way that the statute is written, it really gets at being compelled to work against your will, but not for any kind of physical restraint reason. Really, it's inducement by serious threats, and abuse of the law is one of the theories, which just means you are misusing an aspect of the law to keep people working for you. So if you can put that in this context, right? They're promised all these things. They've gone into debt. They're here. They're not doing at all what they're supposed to be doing. They don't want to keep doing it. And they're told, you can go home and be in debt. And I don't think I mentioned this before, that some of the employees at Livingston did kind of threaten them with being sent home, implying in some ways deportation. But the Guatemalan recruiter really laid into them and threatened that they could be barred from returning to the U.S. They could be deported, detained, really instilling the fear that probably every migrant worker has, is that, you're either going to be deported or you'll never be able to come back for work. And both of those things are pretty typical ways of instilling like a threat of serious harm on migrant workers. So that's the trafficking claim. And I don't know if you have any questions on that or.
Well, why don't we go through the whole thing and then maybe I'll have a few follow-up questions.
Okay. The other claims include there's another statute called the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was passed as the New Deal. That act, in terms of what it covers for ag workers, is very interesting because it's supposed to regulate work hours and overtime. I don't know if your listeners know, but ag workers are exempt. Ag workers in the field are exempt from overtime. Ag workers in animal industry and kind of production should be getting overtime. But that's just, part of the legacy of exceptions for the ag industry, right? In this case, it's a little bit nuanced, but if you have to pay fees that are required by your employer related to the job, and those fees bring down your wages below minimum wage, that is considered a deduction that you are owed reimbursement for. So yeah, complicated. That's one of the issues relating to the recruitment fees. Um, then I mentioned RICO. That's really, on a broad level, a conspiracy claim between Worldwide Farmers, so the sponsoring agency, and LEI, the host agency, and how they collaborated together to commit fraud to bring these workers in as general laborers and underpay them.
Yeah, I will actually, as long as we're at Rico, maybe I will ask a question because it did seem like this is exactly the kind of thing that, well, maybe not why RICO was invented, because it was invented for organized crime, and this is similar, but not the same as organized crime. But it's like splitting up the roles. Like WFE Worldwide is not the employer; they're just a sponsor. The pig farm is just following the program that was set forth by Worldwide. Like, is one of the reasons that RICO is useful here because these entities are able to point the finger at each other and avoid liability. Is that one of the purposes of bringing RICO causes of action, which for the few people who probably aren't that familiar, involves enhancing crimes because they are the result of a conspiracy.
I don't know if we thought about it exactly like that, although I like the framing. I think we genuinely thought there is a conspiracy between them to do this together because they both benefit from the fraud. So Worldwide Farmers Exchange, I didn't mention this before, but not only makes, we believe, a profit from the recruitment fees that the workers are paying, but Livingston pays them per trainee that they recruit. So there is this symbiotic financial incentive, right, to do this, to bring these workers and then deliver them where Livingston can both underpay them and pay Worldwide Farmers
Okay.
money in exchange. So there is this kind of circular profit going on, right? So I think that's where we got to that point. But I think it makes sense to also say they can't blame each other because we think they're both in on it. And the training program really helps to solidify that, the paper they signed.
Yeah. I know also there were a number of different, which we won't go into, complications of which RICO enterprise, but one of them named the U.S. State Department as an unwitting participant. Are they really an unwitting participant?
Good question. That's always such a funny. I love that part of RICO, that you can include a government agency as an unwitting participant. We've done it. I've done it before in other cases where really probably they were unwitting, like they're just signing up on the paperwork. Here, you're right. I mean, there is a little more evidence that they at least ignored what was happening and probably ignored previous complaints about this. We did do a FOIA on the State Department, and we did get at least some evidence that they were aware specifically of Livingston misusing the program in years prior to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seems surprising that they wouldn't be. All right. Have we covered the essential? I know there were also a few Nebraska claims that, but we covered the essential causes of action. I had said I'd go back to the trafficking victims because the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, and I think that the theory is that the J-1 visa is what made the arrangement coercive, and they used a legal process to kind of bind the workers. Is that right? That they were actually using the law in order to coerce these people into working at basically slave wages?
Yes, I think they were abusing the law to make them work against their will. Yeah. I think that's important because you could use the J-1 program lawfully, right? And everybody would be fine. In this case, they were purposefully using it for purposes it was not intended for. And they knew that. And they've been doing it for years. And the reason they're doing that is because they know that if they get people here in this kind of in-debt situation, vulnerable, they don't know people here, they don't have transportation, they can't get other jobs. It's maybe that's not obvious, but when you come on a visa, a temporary visa of any kind, it's very hard. And I think in the J-1 case, maybe not possible to get another visa for a job, right? It's just very difficult. And employers know that. So I think the point is, yeah, they were misusing this program in order to make sure that most people won't leave, or will put up with the work and the conditions and the bait and switch aspect of it because they
Yeah.
don't feel like they have a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know anything about J-1 visas, but my impression is, I mean, maybe it's with H-2A visas, I'm not sure, but they really can't get in it. I mean, they're not legally authorized to get in it. I mean,
Right.
they've come here to do this.
Yeah. And it's not even a work visa. So yeah, it would be very hard. I think
Yeah.
theoretically the agency, so like Worldwide Farmers, if Worldwide Farmers thought a host company was doing something wrong,
Okay.
theoretically, I think they could place them somewhere else.
Okay,
But
that
obviously,
makes sense. That makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah.
In this case, the agency was in on it, so it's never going to happen.
As far as, I mean, I could tell there have been I think pre-answer 12B6 motions to dismiss, but they were a really long time ago. What's the story?
Yes, glad you noticed. Oh my God. Interestingly, actually, so both Worldwide Farmers and Livingston and the individual defendants filed motions to dismiss, but they were only partial motions to dismiss. So there are claims that should be going forward. In this case, the Nebraska district judge did not allow us to move forward with the discovery. Some judges will, on a partial motion to dismiss or even a full motion to dismiss, right? Yeah, I know. She did not think it was efficient for us to move forward while those motions were pending. And they have been pending for over a year, about a year and 2 months, I think. And I don't have a lot of insight. I mean, the insight we've received is just that this judge has a lot on her plate. We are trying to brainstorm if there's any way for us to move this forward. So if you have any ideas, but yeah, it's been frustrating. And that is one of the frustrating parts of trying to get workers to sign up for this, is because it can be years. I mean, I've had cases go on for almost a decade, right? With appeals and everything. So it is a frustrating aspect of our justice system. Yeah.
All right. I didn't have time, I admit it, to go through all the arguments for dismissal and your responses, and we don't really have time to go into them here. Is there anything notable?
No, I mean, I would say they're pretty procedural. I think the main thing was that they weren't moving to dismiss the trafficking claims. I mean, there was an aspect of it, but in general, they weren't. So yeah, that to me was an interesting choice. But
what kind of relief are you seeking? What possible recourse is there?
Yeah, monetary primarily. For us, it's also about, there are punitive damages available for some of these. So it really is also about kind of exposing this abuse, hopefully drawing attention to it from many angles so that it doesn't happen to other people, and that, there is some, I don't know if, this is rude, but I don't know if they can feel shame, but there is some shame to, being,
well, maybe embarrassment.
Yes, embarrassment. Yeah, there you go. Embarrassment. And you hope, I mean, we all hope that it will put other employers on alert or other agencies on alert to kind of prevent these things from happening.
But money would be nice too. I mean, are all three of them back in Guatemala pursuing their, hopefully not pig farming?
Yeah, no, but they're not pig farming. I think I should probably just stay quiet about where they are.
Okay.
They're all fine and
That's
they're all
fine.
in legal status,
Sure.
but yeah,
Sure.
maybe just, yeah.
All right. I mean, unless I've missed something on that case, I would like to also mention, not go into as deeply, but another case you're handling. And this one involves temporary protected status, which, I hear about on the news these days. But apparently this is the Haitian workers. And can you just give us the short version of what happened to these immigrants, plus kind of how this temporary protected status relates to animal ag?
Oh gosh, that's fascinating, that part. I'll try to be brief about the story, but in in Colorado, so Greeley, Colorado has a JBS meat plant. I hope your listeners know about JBS, but one of the worst. We know bad. One of the worst.
I think most people have heard of JBS.
Okay.
It's the biggest meat company in the world.
Right. So starting in 2023, there was a Haitian U.S. citizen living in Greeley who started recruiting, who found out there were jobs at JBS and started recruiting fellow Haitians to work there with, again, promises of housing, good pay. I think the main lure was that you didn't have to speak English to take these jobs. And so I think up to 2,000 Haitians probably took these jobs, right? Came flooding into Greeley. Um, and so they are now, believe the majority of workers in that Greeley plant. Um, and what happened was because there were so many of them, and again, they don't know their rights, they don't speak English. That was part of the whole condition.
It's probably a plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was intentional, as we'll get to with the TPS status. But they weren't trained in a language they understood. Again, they didn't know their rights. They don't even know how to talk to anyone about their rights because no one spoke their language. They're put on a line where JBS speeds up the line. These lines move fast already in kind of cruel ways. But this was, I don't think lines have ever been recorded to go as high as they were putting them on the lines where there were a majority of Haitians. So obviously that's terrible for the animals, terrible for the workers. I mean, just the amount of injuries and the musculoskeletal injuries, but also just, you're working with sharp knives.
Yeah.
So many things can happen. And that is one of the main reasons the Haitians ended up seeking legal services, is just because they were getting so injured on these incredibly fast lines. And they ultimately did have an ally in the union who was a fellow Haitian. So TPS is, I think, as you said, temporary protected status, and maybe people have been hearing about it in the news because the Trump administration is trying to cancel it. It's a form of status that's, I think the easiest way to say it's like asylum. It's just much faster to get. If you're seeking asylum, it's going to take years before you're interviewed and approved. Many, many delays in the system. TPS is a way to really, get people that status quickly so they can they're here, they can work legally. And it is reserved for countries that the administration has determined are too dangerous for people to go back to for a variety, whether it's war, famine. I mean, in Haiti, it was all of those things. There's conflict, there's famine, there's natural disasters. I mean, it's very dangerous. And Haiti had TPS renewed for a number of years, and most recently under Biden. So one of the reasons people on TPS are so attractive to places like JBS is, as we discussed, they're here kind of precariously. They often don't know the language. They don't have a lot of choices. They don't know their rights. They're afraid of exerting their rights because of being fired and being out of work. And this is something that actually JBS, I think, helped pioneer, which is the reliance on refugees.
Mm-hmm.
You can include TPS in the refugee population. In the maybe the 2010s, so after 2006, because under George W. Bush, they did a number of raids on the meatpacking plants. I mean, it was like a huge effort to raid the meatpacking plants to get rid of undocumented workers. And it successfully did. And so many of those meatpacking plants had to shut down. Smith was the meatpacking plant in Greeley that went bankrupt partially because of these raids. And JBS bought it. And they thought, well, how do we prevent raids from ruining our company? Oh, we'll find refugees who have legal status. Yes, the
Not
refugee pipeline.
we'll hire Americans and pay them.
No,
never occurred to them to do that.
No. And in fact, many of them have relationships with refugee resettlement programs to directly, it's like a pipeline, right, to get these refugees in. And they'll cycle through them. Before the Haitians, it was Somalis. The Somalis had sued them for discrimination, religious discrimination. Once they settled that, they were happy to get rid of them and bring in new refugees. So, yeah, it's part of the exploitative process, right?
I mean, it would be nice if it's because they care about people who have been downtrodden. But let's face it, it's not what's going on here. Cheap desperate labor. Who doesn't want that? All right. Like I said, we don't have time to go. I just wanted to get a taste of that, and that was more than enough. Because the other thing, the thing I'm really obsessed about actually is H-2A visas, which might sound odd because they don't really include a lot of animal ag because they're for temporary uh, people, seasonal workers, pick people who pick vegetables mostly. But I know the industry, the animal ag industry. I think I know especially dairy, and I live in an area where there's loads and loads of dairy, and they want to change this so much. They want H-2A visas to apply to animal ag, especially dairy, even though it's year. The whole reason for H-2A, if I understand it, is that it's seasonal. They come and they go. So can you kind of explain what an H-2A visa is and what it would mean to expand them to animal ag? Because I think that's going to happen.
Oh, me too. I think this is the time for it to happen. They've been, as you said, dairy and hog farmers or producers have been begging for this for decades. I mean, for so long. Okay, so H-2A is what we call the agricultural visa. It's a temporary visa that allows employers, the farmers, to bring in foreign workers because they can't find U.S. workers. So that's a key part of the H-2A program. You have to prove in a way to USCIS, so that's the Immigration Services, that you cannot find American workers to do these jobs. So it was always intended to be like a Band-Aid, right? We need people to work the fields because we're feeding America. So we temporarily are allowed to bring them in to fill these shortages.
And we don't want to pay them enough to employ.
You can't find Americans because you're not paying better wages and the conditions are terrible. Now, I will say when Congress created the H-2A program, it did put in a number of regulations that are supposed to be both protective of the H-2A worker and a way to prevent farmers from purposefully undercutting U.S. wages, right? So there is, I don't want to be too granular, but part of the H-2A program is that the federal government will set the wages for H-2A workers in every state based on what they think is a prevailing wage. And traditionally that goes up every year. Obviously the farmers don't like that, but it's a relatively low wage because it's field work. So it's probably hovering between, at this point, it may be around $11 in most, if I'm averaging out the states. The West Coast is higher. So the employer has to pay for their travel. The employer has to pay for their housing. Really, like a lot of the onus is on the employer. And the reason that it's worth it is because they can kind of pay these lower wages and because, they can have significant control over these workers who can only work for the employer on their visa. Yeah. So that's part of the real exploitative process is like they get hired by an employer. It's on their visa. They cannot work for another employer. So when I was a farm worker lawyer, we saw a lot of cases where the promised wage was $11 and they would pay them $6 and say, what are you going to do about it? Right.
And we have the same sort of housing issues that we had in today's case, right?
Oh, yeah.
Extremely substandard.
Oh, extremely. Yeah. And often on the property of the farmer. So people can't get to them, there's a lot going on there, but you're absolutely right. It does not apply to dairy and hog farms because it's supposed to be temporary and seasonal. In fact, I don't think you can get it approved. You can't get it approved for longer than 11 months. 11 months already seems too long for seasonal work, but there's that. So for years, they've been trying to do that because they could benefit from the lower wages and the temporary work. And I mean, there's so many benefits too. Like if you don't like someone, you don't have to bring them back. You can discriminate on the basis of gender and age. That's I think the Fifth Circuit has found that's totally permissible because you're recruiting in a different country. Yeah. So there's lots of benefits to it. And that's why the animal ag wants to get in on it. Was there some other aspect of that you wanted me to discuss?
No, I just wanted your point of view. I mean, there are probably many other aspects, but I don't know enough to ask. But I really just wanted your point of view on that I have that this is happening and it's going to be disastrous for
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it'll create it already has, but it will create kind of a permanent permanent temporary underclass.
Oh, it really is
Yeah.
like indentured servitude.
Hmm.
Like we have this underclass working in this country that is feeding us, and everybody just acts like it's okay.
And this administration is currently reducing the wages, right? Like they recently cut by dollars an hour, several dollars an hour, the federal wages that the ag workers are supposed to get.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
imagine
I
that
didn't know
though.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, it's
But
terrible.
I'm
So
not remotely surprised.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's not
exactly.
just
Yeah,
this administration. I mean,
yeah,
we expect nothing, but it's been in place for years.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's you know, and I'm just going to add one. I'm going to let you go, I promise, cuz I've kept you too long, but I'm writing this thing about ag laws. And
Hmm.
it just occurred to me that that's another advantage of having foreign workers. I mean, the financial advantages are obviously the big one, and the ability to totally control people who are so vulnerable. But the other thing is they were getting pretty head up about the fact that undercover operatives from animal rights organizations really ripped a lid off of factory farming. I mean,
Oh
when
my
I
God.
started
Yeah,
doing this, people did not know anything. And now pretty much everybody knows that it's bad.
yeah.
Um, that they don't know exactly maybe what's going on, but they know that the way we treat animals is bad. So that's just another advantage of not having to hire Americans. And I shouldn't say
Oh
just
my God.
Americans, but
Absolutely.
people who are not enslaved, basically.
Yeah,
Just maybe a little
yeah.
extreme, but not that extreme. That's the last point I had to make. But is there anything you want to add to this whole story of why animal lawyers should care about? And animal lawyers and animal rights advocates do care about people. That's a rap we get all the time that isn't true. We sometimes have trouble getting anybody who wants to work with us, like, who sees
Oh,
our participation as being a plus. But I think animal agriculture is a nightmare that we're all living through, and
oh yeah.
got to come at it from many different angles.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I guess I just want to say I'm so glad you invited me because I do think that there's lots of room for collaboration here. And, the more we can expose what's happening to both animals and humans who are being exploited in order to be abusive to the animals is is a
Yeah.
positive thing that if we can work
Well,
together.
it's what I love about FarmSTAND is that it brings
Yeah.
all the issues together. Really a great organization. So thank you so much for joining us today for trying to make clear what was very confusing to all of us. Thanks also so much to Vicki Beechler and Akbar Khan for their help in producing the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatcher or on YouTube, and see you next time.